By afternoon, the story had gone viral. Hashtag HOA Karen was trending on social media, complete with videos of the animated displays and photos of Karen peeking through her blinds. The evening tours were sold out, though admission remained free, as promised. At sunset, Karen made a decision that surprised even herself. She opened her front door and stepped outside, still in her robe, but with her head held high. The crowd fell silent as she walked toward Emma Henderson, who was addressing the tour group with a bullhorn. "Mrs. Henderson," Karen called out, her voice carrying across the lawn. "I'd like to make a statement." Emma lowered the bullhorn, her expression wary but curious. The news cameras swiveled toward Karen, and she felt the weight of dozens of stares. "I was wrong," Karen said simply. "Your decorations are beautiful, your children are clearly happy, and I let my need for control turn into something ugly." She paused, looking around at her neighbors' faces. "But I have one condition for my apology." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Karen smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed in days. "Next year, I want to help. This neighborhood could use a little more magic and a little less management." The crowd erupted in applause, but Karen noticed Emma exchange a meaningful look with David. There was something in their expressions that suggested their elaborate revenge had been about more than just Halloween decorations. As the crowd dispersed and the news crews packed up, Emma approached Karen on her doorstep. "You know," Emma said quietly, "we looked into the HOA bylaws pretty thoroughly while planning our response. There are some interesting things in there about board member accountability and community voting procedures. Things that might surprise you." Karen felt a familiar chill, but this time it came with a flutter of something that might have been excitement. "What are you saying?" Emma's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say this Halloween might be the beginning of some very interesting changes in Willowbrook Estates. Changes that go way beyond decorations." As Emma walked away, Karen stood in her doorway wondering if she'd just negotiated a truce or walked straight into an even more elaborate trap. Karen Pemberton's morning coffee cup shattered against her pristine kitchen floor as she stared out her window at 47 Maple Street. A 12-foot inflatable skeleton was gyrating obscenely on her neighbor's lawn, its bony pelvis thrusting to imaginary music while fog machines billowed smoke across the perfectly manicured sidewalk. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the giant animatronic witch cackling, "HOA Karen is a nightmare." Every 30 seconds, loud enough to wake the dead, and more importantly, loud enough to embarrass Karen in front of the entire Willowbrook Estates community. "That's it," Karen muttered, her face flushing crimson as she grabbed her phone. "I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. This ends today." 20 minutes later, Karen sat rigidly at the head of the community center conference table, her stack of violation notices organized with military precision. The other board members filed in looking annoyed, except for Ted Morrison, who seemed to be suppressing a smirk. "This is about the Henderson house, isn't it?" asked Margaret Finch, the treasurer, settling into her chair with a sigh. "It's about maintaining property values and community standards," Karen snapped, pulling up photos on her laptop. "Look at this monstrosity. 12-foot skeleton. Fog machines running 24/7. Recorded witch sounds that start at 6 a.m. It's a violation of sections 4.2, 7.8, and 12.1 of our community guidelines." Ted leaned back in his chair. "Karen, it's Halloween. The decorations will be down in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? Karen's voice pitched higher. "Do you know what this is doing to our property values? The Hendersons moved in 6 months ago, and they think they can turn our distinguished neighborhood into some kind of haunted carnival." She clicked through more photos, each one making her more agitated. There was a cemetery scene complete with motion-activated zombies, a giant spider descending from the roof, and worst of all, a sign that read "Karen's Haunted HOA Tours Daily at Sunset." "They're using my name," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "They're mocking me personally." Margaret squinted at the laptop screen. "Well, it is rather elaborate." "Elaborate." Karen stood up so fast her chair rolled backward. "It's warfare, pure and simple." The vote was closer than Karen expected, -3 to 2 in favor of issuing violations. Ted and board member Sarah Chen voted against, citing community spirit and seasonal tolerance. But Karen had her victory. She hand-delivered the violation notice herself, marching up the Hendersons' walkway past the grasping skeleton hands that emerged from fake grave dirt. The fog machines hissed ominously as she approached the front door, and the witch's cackle seemed to grow louder with each step. David Henderson answered the door, a tall man in his 30s with paint-stained fingers and an amused expression. Behind him, Karen could see his wife Emma hanging fake cobwebs in the foyer while their twin 8-year-old daughters watched from the stairs. "Mrs. Pemberton," David said pleasantly, "what can we do for you?" Karen thrust the violation notice forward. "You have 48 hours to remove these displays. They're in violation of multiple HOA regulations." David scanned the paper, his smile fading. "Seriously? We spent weeks on this. The kids have been so excited." "Excitement doesn't excuse violating community standards," Karen replied crisply. 48 hours. As she turned to leave, she heard Emma Henderson's voice from inside. "Well, if she wants to play hardball." Karen paused, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the October air. Something in Emma's tone suggested this was far from over. That night, Karen lay awake listening to the distant sound of the witch's cackle, now seemingly louder and more frequent. But worse than the artificial sounds were the real ones. The whispered conversations she could hear through her bedroom window, the soft footsteps on the sidewalk, the occasional burst of muffled laughter. At 3 a.m., she finally got up to look outside. The Henderson house was dark, but she could swear she saw shadows moving across their lawn. And was that a new sign by their mailbox? She squinted through the darkness, making out the words. "HOA Karen's revenge tour starts tomorrow." What are they planning? She whispered to herself, her reflection ghostly in the window glass. The next morning would bring answers, and escalate their war in ways Karen never could have imagined. Karen's doorbell rang at exactly 6 a.m., jarring her from restless sleep. She stumbled to the front door in her robe, expecting to find a package or perhaps another board member with concerns about the Henderson situation. Instead, she found Mayor Patricia Walsh standing on her doorstep with a clipboard and a thoroughly unamused expression. "Karen, we need to talk," the mayor said, brushing past her into the foyer. "I've received 17 complaints about excessive noise violations, 3 citations for disturbing the peace, and 1 very interesting call from the fire department about fog machine safety regulations." Karen's stomach dropped. "I don't understand. I followed proper procedure. The complaints aren't about you filing violations," Patricia interrupted. "They're about your house." "My house?" Karen spun around, following the mayor's gaze through the living room window. Her perfectly manicured front lawn was now home to a massive billboard reading, "Karen's Haunted HOA House of Horrors, ADNISS free. Witness the scariest EAK any over I case." But that wasn't all. Motion-activated speakers had been strategically placed around her property, and as she watched in horror, a jogger passed by, triggering a recorded announcement. "Welcome to Karen's House of Complaints. Please keep your decorations under 6 inches tall and your fun to a minimum." "How is this legal?" Karen gasped, rushing outside in her robe and slippers. The mayor followed, checking her clipboard. "Technically, none of it's on your property. The Hendersons researched city ordinances pretty thoroughly. The billboard is on the exact property line. The speakers are positioned on public sidewalk easements, and according to the city noise ordinance, recorded announcements are permitted between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Karen noticed neighbors emerging from their houses, some laughing, others recording videos on their phones. Mrs. Patterson from across the street waved cheerfully and called out, "Love the new display, Karen. Very authentic." "This is harassment," Karen said, her voice shaking. "Pure harassment." "Actually," Patricia continued, "it gets worse. The Hendersons have applied for a special events permit to host educational HOA tours every evening this week. They're calling it a community awareness initiative about homeowner association overreach. Karen felt the blood drain from her face. They can't do that. They can, and they did. The permit was approved yesterday afternoon. Patricia's expression softened slightly. Karen, I've known you for 15 years. You're passionate about community standards, but this has gotten out of hand. The Hendersons' original decorations were well within city guidelines, but the HOA guidelines don't supersede city ordinances when it comes to seasonal displays, Patricia finished. I strongly suggest you find a way to resolve this before tonight's tour. The local news station has already called asking for comment. As if summoned by her words, a white van with Channel 7 News emblazoned on the side pulled up to the curb. A reporter and cameraman climbed out, immediately drawn to the billboard, and the crowd of neighbors gathering with coffee cups and curious expressions. Karen fled back inside, but her phone was already ringing. Ted Morrison's name flashed on the screen. Karen, what the hell is happening? Ted's voice was strained. Sarah just sent me a video of your house. There's a news crew. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid. They're the ones who escalated this, Karen protested, watching through her blinds as the reporter interviewed Emma Henderson. I followed proper procedure. You went to war with the family over Halloween decorations. Ted shot back. And now the whole community is going to be on the evening news looking like a bunch of uptight suburbanites who hate fun. Karen hung up and sank into her kitchen chair, watching her coffee grow cold. Through the window, she could see more neighbors gathering, some setting up lawn chairs as if waiting for a show. The Hendersons had turned her own block into a spectacle, and she was the unwilling star. But as she watched Emma Henderson gesture enthusiastically to the reporter, something shifted in Karen's chest. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was something that felt uncomfortably close to admiration. The Hendersons had outmaneuvered her completely, using her own tactics against her with surgical precision.